any success. If you have been the people's guide for the past 300 years, we are still on the people's side. We have no doubts or fears. So, Lord God, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. What we are not, make us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. This chamber is in session. Honorable members, minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 20th of October, to be confirmed.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that the minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, the 29th of October, 2024, be confirmed.
The question is that those minutes be confirmed. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. We think the ayes have it. Honorable members, the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 19th of November, to be deferred. Honorable member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that the minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, the 19th of November, 2024, be deferred.
The question is that the minutes held on November, excuse me, 19th, 2024 be deferred. All our members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Deputy Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the President. Petitions, papers. Right, Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the Government of Barbados Mid-Year Review Report for the period April to September 2024, and the Ministerial Statement on the Government of Barbados Mid-Year Review Report for the period April to September 2024.
Government notices.
Government notices are honorable member for Christchurch East.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move a resolution to approve, it is give notice of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the vesting in the NH National Housing Corporation of the parcels of land situated at Holders Hill in the parish of St. James Innes Island for residential purposes.
Private members' notices. Notices of questions. Reports from select committees. First, reports from select committees.
Honourable Member for St. George. Report on select committee.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the committee is requesting that this be deferred for 3 weeks.
The question is that this joint select committee have an
Be
extension.
extended and deferred for 3 weeks.
Be extended for a third 3-week period. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
First readings of bills, statements by ministers.
Honourable member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Public Finance Management Act 2019 requires that the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment prepare a mid-year review to report on progress made against the fiscal framework and the annual budget. The full report laid in Parliament provides an update on the fiscal outturn for the first 6 months of the fiscal year 2024-2025, reviews the fiscal performance against targets set under the fiscal framework, and is available for members and the public to review. This is critical as we continue to improve transparency and accountability in the management of the public finances. Madam Deputy Speaker, we present this report at a time when the global economic environment continues to face several challenges. The lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical tensions, and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict have resulted in economic uncertainty and price volatility. Despite these challenges, Barbados has remained resilient, continuing its recovery with strong performance in tourism and construction sectors. These sectors have driven economic growth and created employment opportunities for Barbadians. Over the past 6 months of the fiscal year 2024-25, the economy has shown positive momentum. The economy is expected to grow at a rate of 3.9%. Tourism remains the cornerstone of this growth, supported by the construction sector, which is expected to grow with critical projects such as the geriatric hospital and the road rehabilitation program progressing steadily. Madam Deputy Speaker, I now turn to the government's revenue performance for the first half of the fiscal year. Total revenue for the period amounted to $1.87 billion, exceeding the forecast of $1.66 billion by 12.5%. This overperformance was driven by strong collections from net corporation tax receipts, which amounted to $384.49 million, exceeding the mid-year forecast of $237.3 million by $147.22 million. However, over the medium term, net income tax receipts declined by $3.75 million compared to the anticipated target for the current midpoint of the financial year. The revised forecast for total revenue for fiscal year 2024-25 now stands at $3.543 billion, reflecting the strong revenue performance in the first half of the fiscal year. Property taxes also performed well, with collections exceeding expectations. Property tax receipts total $180 million, exceeding the forecasted $86.47 million by $93.53 million. This overperformance was mainly due to net land tax receipts exceeding the mid-year target by $85.87 million due to earlier issuance of land tax bills. Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst VAT receipts underperformed, domestic consumption remains strong, sustained by the ongoing recovery in tourism and increased consumer confidence. Total net VAT receipts amounted to $524.55 million, $30.21 million below the target, partly due to higher than expected refunds. Madam Deputy Speaker, total government expenditure for the first 6 months of fiscal year 2024-25 stood at $1.70 billion, below the forecasted $1.763 billion. Delays in capital project execution drove the lower than expected expenditure performance. Wages and salaries, including National Insurance Scheme contributions, total $392.39 million, mainly in line with the mid-year target. The actual outturn included interest payments of $372.8 million, debt service costs of $6.3 million, principal repayments of $322.9 million, and sinking fund contributions of $15.7 million. Total expenditure was lower than projected, primarily due to slow uptake of domestic securities and redemption of savings bonds than projected, as well as policy-based loans, which ultimately were not pursued as envisaged. Capital expenditure was the area of underperformance, with spending for the period totaling $107.44 million, below the forecasted $136 million by some $28.52 million. The underperformance in capital expenditure is primarily attributed to delays in infrastructure projects. Several public sector projects have been initiated, including road repairs and housing developments. Madam Deputy Speaker, the revised forecast for total expenditure for fiscal year 2024-25 now stands at $3.78 billion, reflecting the expected increase in capital works expenditure in the second half of the fiscal year. The government remains committed to investing in critical infrastructure to support economic growth while maintaining a prudent approach to managing recurrent expenditure. Madam Deputy Speaker, I now turn to the issue of public debt and the fiscal balance. At the end of, as at September 30th, 2024, Barbados' total public debt was $14.878 billion, approximately 104.8% of GDP. This is comprised of external debt of $5.6169 billion, domestic debt of $8.9833 billion, external guarantee debt of $58.8 million, and central government arrears of $222 million. The government prioritizes debt servicing to ensure we remain in good standing with our creditors and maintain access to international financial markets. As we moved into the second half of the fiscal year, total debt service payments as at September 30th, 2024, including sinking fund contributions, amounted to approximately $717.8 million, compared to the approved estimate of $742.6 million for the period April to September. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am pleased to report that the government achieved a fiscal balance of $169.38 million, or 1.16% of GDP, compared to a forecasted deficit of $100.32 million. This significant improvement reflects the overperformance in revenue and controlled expenditure, particularly in recurrent expenditure. Madam Deputy Speaker, in light of the mid-year performance, the government has reviewed its fiscal framework. The framework outlines the fiscal targets and expenditure ceilings required to maintain fiscal discipline and reduce the debt to GDP ratio. The revised framework considers the stronger than expected revenue performance and the slight underperformance in capital expenditure. The primary balance target of $558.04 million for the fiscal year 2024-25 is unchanged. However, due to an expected improvement in the gross domestic product, it now equates to 3.8% of GDP instead of the initial target of 4%. At the end of September 2024, the primary balance stood at 3.7% of GDP. The government aims to continue its fiscal consolidation efforts under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government's focus on public sector reform remains a central pillar of our economic strategy. As part of the broader Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, we have undertaken significant efforts to improve the efficiency of public services, reduce waste, and enhance the governance of state-owned enterprises. Reforming SOEs is a key priority with the aim of reducing the fiscal burden on the government's budget while ensuring that these entities operate efficiently. Over the past year, the government has made significant strides in restructuring several state-owned enterprises, resulting in improved operational performance and a reduction in subsidies. Tax administration has also been a focus of the government's reform efforts. The Barbados Revenue Authority continues to implement measures to improve tax compliance, reduce arrears, and enhance the overall efficiency of the tax system. These efforts have contributed to the stronger revenue performance seen in the first half of the fiscal year, and we expect further gains as these reforms continue to take effect. Madam Deputy Speaker, as we move forward into the second half of this fiscal year, 2024-25, the government remains committed to maintaining fiscal discipline while supporting economic growth and development. The revised fiscal framework reflects the challenges we face in the global economy, but also the opportunities for growth and resilience. Our focus on public sector reform, debt management, and prudent fiscal policies will ensure that Barbados remains on a sustainable fiscal path, whilst continuing to invest in the future of our people and our country. The achievements of the first half of the fiscal year give us confidence that we are on track to meet our targets, and the government will continue to work tirelessly to ensure that these targets are met. On behalf of the Ministry of Finance, I want to wish the members of Parliament, as well as the people of Barbados, Madam Deputy Speaker, a very happy independence. I'm obliged to you.
Congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day sitting.
Question is, honourable members, the question is that these
Standing orders are mentioned.
standing orders were mentioned be
Suspended for
suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it. Business is now the order of the day.
Order number 10, ma'am. In the name of the Honourable Minister of State in the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, to move the second reading of the Business Barbados Bill 2024.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you so much, Deputy Speaker. It gives me pleasure this morning to rise to pilot this bill because of its tremendous importance to Barbados and to our future. We just heard the statement from the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central speaking about the performance of the Barbados economy, the strides that we have made. And what we're going to present today is another change in the system that will further enhance the growth of this Barbados and enable us to achieve our objectives in terms of reducing our debt to GDP ratio to help us provide goods and services for the people of this nation. I draw your attention, Deputy Speaker, to a time in the past when we had Sewell Airport, and there are those of us who still have very fond memories of Sewell Airport, going out and shaking hands, watching people get on the planes, etc. But it served Barbados well in those early days. But as the demands and changes in the tourism global scene created more demands on our economies, it became obvious that Sewell could no longer serve us. What was happening? Bigger planes were flying. The runway needed to be upgraded to a particular level. There were demands for security that you did not have at Sewell. And so Barbados had to bite the bullet, take the step to switch to Grantley Adams Airport. What would have happened if we had not done that? If we had not made the switch from Sewell to Grantley Adams, it means that all the investment in hotels along the south and the west coast, all the investments by people put in taxis and restaurants and recreational services would have been in vain because the Sewell Airport could never meet the necessary standard for the certification of our airport that would allow those planes to land. Had we not invested, Barbados tourism could not grow. And so it is with KIPO. KIPO, in its early form, helped us to be able to register businesses and help businesses with meeting their regulatory functions. But what has happened over the years, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that KIPO has become overburdened. Why? Because more and more demands were made by the international arena, requesting that we do more and more in terms of managing our international financial service companies. Because of these greater demands, with no changes in structure, without properly increasing the staff, it meant that this overburdened and under-resourced unit could no longer serve Barbados and take Barbados into the future, because it represented a number of problems for our local businesses. The length of time that it took to process filings and applications, the length of time it took to register your intellectual property. It hindered the advancement of our local businesses, both large and small. It also hindered our ability to quickly register international businesses and foreign direct investment that was necessary to be able to take the Barbadian economy forward, provide the jobs for the future, provide increases in our tax revenue, and therefore there was a cry in the nation over what was happening in KIPO. One of the loudest cries would have been coming from the staff, who found themselves in an impossible situation where they were seeking to serve people at the front and still had to do the back work in terms of registering the filings on the system and making sure that those things went. And so there was a backlog. And therefore, Barbados had to take a look at what was it that was needed in order to be able to ensure that we create an entity that is fit for purpose, that suits the 21st century, and could deliver very efficiently, very quickly, the services that were needed for the proper registration and support of our businesses, large and small, foreign and local. And this was made urgent simply because around the world there are trillions of dollars looking for opportunities for investment. Because there was a move afoot by businesses in America to be able to do nearshoring, where they were shifting their locations. And if Barbados wanted to get involved in attracting some of those businesses, then we had to do something to make CAIPO fit for purpose. And hence, Business Barbados Bill 2024 is now before this chamber to start that very important journey. Because if our republic is to soar, if our republic is to grow, CAIPO has to change. So in Section 5 of the bill, it establishes Business Barbados as a commercial state-owned enterprise, and it is to operate with full corporate powers independent of government, and it is there to be able to provide the services that will help our businesses to meet their regulatory obligations. And Section 6 outlines what are the duties that are to be performed by Business Barbados. And when you examine that section, you'll realize it is trying to streamline the business facilitation services and make it possible for businesses to do a number of functions with one movement. And thus, we create greater ease of use, reduce the wait times, and we're able to help businesses operate much faster. What they've sought to do with the establishment of Business Barbados is to be able to subsume the functions of CAIPO within Business Barbados and then connect those with the wider business facilitation system so that a person could actually make contact via the digital platform with BRA, they could make contact with customs, they could make contact with immigration, etc., and therefore allow us to reduce the length of time it takes for businesses to get registered and to meet their obligations. In order to achieve this, what is part of the new structure is splitting two of the functions, the corporate registry function from the intellectual property function. And each of these units will have heads, and additional staff will now be assigned to these units, which will allow the staff to deliver dedicated service to our businesses, local and foreign, small and large. Now, why is this important? One of the things that has been put in the section in the bill at section 13 and 14 is that the heads of those two divisions will have quasi-judicial responsibilities. And it is important that in order to fulfill that role, that they be independent of the CEO, so that there is impartiality in how they deliver on their quasi-judicial functions. This will bring justice and certainty to the process for our business community. Section 7011 establishes the governance model and the organizational structures, the duty of the board, the CEO, to ensure that we have good governance and management of Business Barbados, that we can overcome the limitations that we would have experienced under CAIPO. But what excites me the most, Madam Deputy Chair, is the fact that with these changes, Business Barbados will be in a better position to support the growth and development of small businesses, helping them to be more compliant with their regulatory obligations, and helping them to establish protection for their intellectual property. And I just want to touch on this so that people understand what it meant when those functions could not be done swiftly and efficiently. You will remember, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we would have developed the Trust Funds Program. And part of the requirements for being able to get the $5,000 loan in order to start your little business to be able to put food on the table for your family. We started it during COVID to help ease the pressure of people who were unemployed. But one of the requirements, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that that business must be registered, which meant that that small business person, if they did not already have a business, had to walk through the process of going to KIPO, being able to register that new business and ensure that they do all the necessary things in order to have a legal entity operating. And because KIPO was not in a condition or in a position to be able to fully service the hundreds of people who came in with filings every day, the thousands of calls that came in every month, it meant that it created a bottleneck, and the end result that there were some small business persons, people who were looking for opportunities to start a little business to put food on the table, they were held up and therefore could not get that $5,000 loan. And this created pain within our society. And therefore, bringing on board now a new entity, Business Barbados, allows us to avoid creating that unnecessary pain in the lives of Barbadians, because we are developing a more efficient structure, and we are going to be able to help our small businesses to be able to register easily. And how will they do that? One of the things that has been that will be set up is an advisory services unit, where there will be dedicated staff who are aware of all of the information that is necessary for small businesses, and to be able to guide and advise that small business that has to walk through that system at Business Barbados, and allows them to very, very quickly get work done. One of the challenges that we would have experienced because KIPO was unable to respond, I'll never forget, I had calls from people in my constituency. This was where people had established a business a long time ago and never really did anything about it. They just registered the name. And they never conducted any business. People started charities, and some charities were just limping along, or they were just not functioning. But there was a penalty for not making your reports every year into KIPO. And what that resulted in, by the time they were informed, after the international system insisted that KIPO had to get after everybody who was registered, everybody who had not paid, it sent shock waves through charities and people who had registered businesses and hadn't done anything with it. I remember the panic of people calling me because they received a notice saying they owed $10,000, $50,000, $70,000. They couldn't sleep. Their ulcers flared. Their blood pressure went up. But because we are a caring government, and because we understand the circumstances, immediately the Ministry of Finance put out a notice saying, look, we will waive those fees. We will waive those penalties and allow you to start fresh. And KIPO then had the job of working with hundreds of businesses to be able to make the waiver occur and then ensure that people started the process of registering and filing as they should. But believe me, that sent a great deal of pain through the Barbadian system. And that is why this work that we are doing here today in terms of the Business Barbados Bill is going to make a tremendous difference in the lives of charities, small businesses, big businesses, to allow us to create an environment that is easier, more supportive, more friendly, to enable us to do business in Barbados. The other improvement that I truly welcome is the improvement of the digital functions, because there were times when that digital infrastructure did not always work as efficiently as it needed to, and this added to the frustrations. But I am delighted to be informed that what is part of the plan for Business Barbados, that they've done assessments on the digital infrastructure, they have looked at the strengths and weaknesses, they have been putting in the changes that are necessary to help it to function and be more customer friendly, and so it will enhance our capacity to be able to work more efficiently and serve people. So Business Barbados then promises a much smoother, hassle-free experience to all of our businesses here in Barbados. One of the things that is an overhang coming from CAIPO is the backlog. There has been a tremendous backlog in terms of registration of businesses, in terms of the intellectual property filings, etc. And so we haven't waited until we started Business Barbados. They're already addressing that backlog. But one of the things we recognize is that there would be a need to have more staff, more trained staff, to help us take care of the backlog and then ensure that that backlog does not happen again. So what we have before us in the Business Barbados Bill is the creation of an entity that is small but is mighty, like the Grantley Adams Airport, that can infuse economic energy into the Barbadian economy. That is why, Madam Deputy Speaker, Business Barbados is everybody's business. And I want to take the time to explain to the public through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to others, why it is important, how is it a mighty key to unlocking the Barbadian economy. I have listened with some dismay as there have been persons who do not truly understand how an economy works, who are not trained in understanding the dynamics of managing a small economy, incite others to rail against economic growth versus social needs. There was a time when people wanted to make out that an excessive focus on economic growth of necessity locks out social needs. But I am here to tell the Barbadian public that social needs cannot be met except through economic growth. That if you don't have the money, you cannot provide for the social needs. And therefore, any government worth its salt, any government that knows and understands its business, any government that cares for the people of their country will understand that you have to have a powerful, innovative, strategic plan for the development of your economy to allow you to be able to meet the needs, the very real needs of the people in your society. When you build economic growth, it generates new businesses. And what does that do? The 4,000 children that come out from school every year, whether from secondary or from university or wherever, if they are going to get jobs, then you must have the continuous formation of new businesses and the expansion of your current businesses so that they can get work. When you cannot produce those jobs, Madam Deputy Speaker, those young people then stop dreaming, because school only led them from the classroom to the block, and their lives wither on that block. And therefore, it is imperative that you build economic growth to be able to absorb those children every year, to allow us to be able to guarantee and ensure them a future. Parents cannot respond to the needs of their children if they cannot get work, if the work they get does not pay well. Only economic growth will help you to attract better paying jobs that allow parents to respond to the needs of their children and for children to have a hope of a future in Barbados. And that is why economic growth is necessary. You have to build economic growth. If you want to provide the services like roads and housing and education, welfare, the geriatric hospital, your youth programs, none of those programs are possible unless you build your government revenues, and government revenues are conditioned by the level of economic growth. No growth, no revenues, then you can't build the society. And if you can't do that, what are you forced to do? You either have to borrow and pay back, or you have to increase the taxes on your current workers in order to get the resources to build social services. And if you do that, that puts pain on the back of families. So it is necessary that we find the economic growth, and any monies that we borrow, those monies must do two things. They have to be positioned into opportunities for economic growth, and they have to respond to any immediate, urgent social needs that need to be fixed immediately. And this is what this Barbados Labour Party administration has done with the millions that we have borrowed in order to make sure we build a foundation. So, the question then that we have to ask, if economic growth is important, how does Business Barbados become critical to that process? And to do that, we have to understand how small economies like ours build economic growth. What do I mean when I say a small economy? Barbados has 269,000 people. They only save $3.3 billion in savings. $3 billion in savings is not going to grow the businesses that you need in order to provide jobs. Because that is so, it means you have to look outside to get foreign direct investment to supplement your domestic savings and to allow the economy to create investments in the businesses that you need to be able to take the economy forward. That is why it was so pleasing to hear yesterday that the American Exim Bank is making $500 million available and providing the opportunity for the private sector and for government to look at how they can invest and be able to get loans to be able to start and do key things in the economy. And I'm trusting that one of my colleagues will speak more on this today to help us understand what is important and what is the role of Business Barbados in helping us make that a reality. So, when you seek to attract businesses, it is important that you have an efficient service to help them to get started. Because if you don't, then that business will go elsewhere. So let us look at how, first of all, you attract businesses to your economy, and then how does Business Barbados secure those whom you attract? It's a two-step process. Part of our business economic system here in Barbados, the ministries that are a part of that ecosystem would be Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. It would be MIST, where you would have Export Barbados, Economic Affairs, where you would have Invest Barbados, the Ministry of Energy and Business, where you would find International Business and Energy, Agriculture and Tourism. All of them are part of that economic system that is to help us go forward and find business and establish business. So what the Barbados government did, recognizing the importance of attracting business into our economy, we spent money on the establishment of embassies and missions in non-traditional places across the world where we believe there are opportunities for business to be attracted to Barbadian shores. And so we established in Kenya, Brazil, Panama, Ghana, and the latest one is Ireland. And we spent between $18 to $20 million to help us establish these new and additional embassies across the world in strategic locations that we believe will give us an opportunity to attract business for Barbados. Because what we have done is sought to staff them with persons with a business orientation. This is where commercial diplomacy is important, that you're able to get your missions and embassies to engage in strategic commercial diplomacy to find people who will want to start businesses in Barbados or people who want to buy goods and services from Barbados so that you can give your economy a tremendous jolt, get it to rise, get it to perform. So it's not unlike, Madam Deputy Speaker, someone looking for breadfruit in a tree. You got to go and search for it. Some may fall on the ground, but it might get damaged. It's better for you to go and search the tree, find the right fruit, pick it so that you can take it home and do what you need to do for your family. And so the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, critical to that. And they are able then to work alongside of Invest Barbados, and Invest Barbados seeks now to encourage that business to make the necessary investments into Barbados. Export Barbados then takes the opportunities for trade and seeks to concretize them into positive benefits where Barbadian goods and services are being sent abroad. Now, the question is, when they go out promoting Barbados, speaking with people about doing business in Barbados, what is it that is going to attract people to choose Barbados above other domiciles? Well, the process in international business is that these big global companies, from time to time, part of their strategy is to locate new outlets in other jurisdictions that might be more beneficial than where they're currently located. And so what they do, they draw up a list of factors by which they assess the suitability of a number of domiciles. So what are some of the things they look at? What are some of the operating costs that I will face versus where I am now? What's the cost of labor? If I'm moving goods, what's the cost of transport? If I'm doing services via the internet, what is the digital infrastructure? How efficient is it? What is the broadband like? Is the connectivity good and strong? The other thing they look at is, what are the financial incentives and what is the tax structure? Will it benefit me to come to that jurisdiction because my company and my strategy is going to be better off and produce more for me if I can find locations that give me the factors that I need. Then the other things they look at. What's the quality of the utilities? Does the water go off regularly? Does the light go off in the middle of a transaction? Does the internet drop out? What is the quality of education? If I'm going to encourage my staff to relocate to a place like Barbados, what is the quality of education that is going to be available to me? What about the healthcare services? All of those are the things that they look at to make a determination about where to locate. And then one of the most important factors, what is the level of political and social stability in the country? Because you don't want a riot, you don't want a war, and next thing you know, investments at risk. So Barbados then has to look at how is it going to play in that arena to attract the businesses that Business Barbados now is going to be able to help us convert into true economic opportunity and provide jobs for people. Now, what we have had to do, our development, Madam Deputy Speaker, is not going to follow the same type of path as a larger economy that has gold or oil or minerals, or it has a lot of land and it can do agriculture and it can do large-scale manufacturing. They're able to take those base industries, generate sufficient revenues, and then they're able to build out all of their infrastructure and all the social services that they need from the activities that are able to take place right there in their country. Barbados has had to use a slightly different approach, and it has been the approach for a number of small economies. We've had to look at a dual purpose development model. Now, what's a dual-purpose development model? It's kind of like when you are at home. If you have a small house and you have limited income, then you can't afford to buy and do all the things that you would like. What you do is you try to find what are the things you can buy in ways that have more than one purpose. So let's take how in America, in small apartments, they use the sofa bed. The sofa bed has two functions. One, it allows the family to have a space to sit on in the afternoons or evenings when they're watching television together. If you have guests and they come to your home, they too are able to enjoy the sofa. But then when they leave, you pull it out and it now converts into a bed. Or if you have a guest who is staying in your home, you're able to pull out your sofa bed. It is dual purpose. Barbados has had to use that approach to its development. Because we don't have the oil, we don't have the minerals that attract a lot of investment into Barbados, we've had to find a different way of attracting investment. We've done some via tourism, we've done some in terms of financial services, but in order to do both of those things, it meant that we had to find up front, without the benefit of large revenues from other sources, to build out the infrastructure and the services that are needed to make the country function well, and use the fact that you have a well-developed infrastructure, well-developed systems, use that as your attraction to get businesses from overseas to consider moving their investment into Barbados. That is what we've had to do, dual purpose. So that when we are building roads, we are building roads for the benefit of Barbadians, the people who live in the home. But we're also building roads to be able to demonstrate to potential investors that we have a sufficient network in sufficiently good condition that would allow them, if they want to run business here, that Barbados works. We invest in sewage, in the sewage treatment plant to rectify the problem that we had. We invest in water, in agriculture. We put millions of dollars into those different areas to make sure that Barbados works, because that investment has a dual purpose. It must serve Barbadians and Barbadian families, but it must also say to the world that Barbados is in a position ready to do business because Barbados works. And this is important. This is why it has been critical for us to make some of the investments that we've made. And the only way to make those investments is to be able to borrow at good interest rates and take that money and use it efficiently and wisely to build capacity to create a Barbados that attracts people from across the world who want to come here not only for tourism, but they want to be able to come and do business. Dual purpose development. And so we've spent $78 million on roads. Those roads are for Barbadians. But we also hasten to get them completed in order that when people came here for various activities, that they could see that Barbados works. We have $130 million in new equipment for health care. This is to make sure that Barbadians have access to the equipment that can keep them healthy and alive. But it also gives assurance to people who are going to come here that we have sufficient quality in our healthcare services that we can take care of them and their families if they should get ill. We've spent more than $17 million in tertiary skills training to ensure that we create a labor pool that when they are looking for a specific set of skills, that we can say, yes, Barbados has those skills, and we are able to supply you with the labor that you need to run your business. And then Export Barbados, 11 million. Public sector modernization, 8.4 million. so that we can have a public sector that works efficiently and does not act as a drag on the economy because they take too long to do things. And right in there is Business Barbados. Because we build the platform for attracting business that will now flow towards Business Barbados. And once Business Barbados is able to do its job efficiently and effectively, that interest is going to convert into jobs. Because once you have the infrastructure, you're going to make a short list with those companies. They sit in boardrooms all across capitals across the world. They look at the assessments that their people have brought in on the different domiciles, and then they make a determination. They create a short list of 3, maybe 4 domiciles that fit the factors that they want. The thing now that sets you apart on that short list is the ease of doing business. How long is it going to take to do the registration? How long will it take to purchase the land and complete the transaction? How long will it take for the port to allow the goods to come in? How long will it take for construction to build the space? How long will it take? That is the thing now that will determine if you are on that short list among the 4, whether you are going to get it or not. And this is where Business Barbados sits. If it does not increase its efficiency, even if we make the short list, we can fall off at any time if we cannot demonstrate that we are able to quickly and efficiently handle the business of getting you set up and registered, and you get your business going, because every day is a cost. And just to give you an example, when you take long to do something, for a small business, if you have to go and spend 2 days trying to get registered at Kaipo, or to file something, you have to go, the line is long, you wait long, you get fed up because you got to run and meet a client or a customer, and you have to come back the next day. You might find it might take you 6 hours or 8 hours or 2 days just to transact that business. What is the cost of a small business? If he could make $200 in an hour, he's now lost $1,600 worth of business that he needs to pay rent, light, and staff. So very often they can't take that kind of time. When you talk about a large business and they hire a professional to go to Kaipo in order to do all of this work while they get on with business, and you are paying that person $15,000, $20,000 a month, and you take 2 months to be able to set up a business in Barbados, the cost of that person is now $40,000 to get set up in Barbados. Whereas if you could get set up in 3 weeks, you would save so much money. That is the impact of inefficiencies in our system. This is what will make Barbados more expensive to function in. This is what will cause you to drop off the short list and not get the business that you need, that will give you the jobs, that will give you the tax revenue, that will buy supplies from your other businesses in your economy, and that is what will cause us not to be able to move forward in the future. Business Barbados can make or break our investment strategy. And Madam Deputy Speaker, Barbados is coming from a long way, a long, long way. We had the misfortune of between 2008 and 2018 to find ourselves in a situation where we did not respond well to the mortgage crisis. And by not responding well to the mortgage crisis, Barbados spiraled out of control. Barbados found itself in a position where it was not creating new businesses, so people were not getting jobs. It meant government wasn't getting revenues, and national insurance was suffering. It resulted in us being the 3rd highest indebted country in the world because the then government borrowed money like crazy, not for investment purposes, not for building out the infrastructure, not for reforming the public services to make them more efficient, but they borrowed it just to spend and waste it on things that could not make that money for Barbados. And we were in a deep, deep, deep hole. That as a result of that, our credit rating was junk. And while people want to forget it, it is why the battle has been so hard over these past 6 years, because of how deep a hole was dug for us. And while some people may be tired of hearing about it, what Barbadians are tired of is the anguish, the poverty, the loss of their lives during that period. And we have been battling for the past 6 years to lift Barbados out of that hole. COVID came and set us back by another 3 years. But we have battled and we have been able to bring Barbados back, and its credit rating has recently been upgraded to B. We still have a way to go in order to get to the top outside of that hole. And I have to commend this government. I have to commend my fellow ministers and the staff of the ministries that have worked in difficult conditions, under tremendous pressure, under-resourced many a time, to help lift Barbados, to help us get up and out from where we are. And we had the report by the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central that shows the progress we're making, but more is needed. And this is where Business Barbados is going to be critical in helping us to go the distance and to reach where it is we need to reach. Because as we seek to attract people, as we try to interest them in coming to Barbados and setting up businesses, it is Business Barbados that will convert that into a reality. And that is why it is important. So I want to especially commend the work of the minister who is in the other honorable chamber, for the work that was done, the permanent secretaries, the officers of the ministry, the specialists that they had to bring in order to help them do the assessments and the diagnostics on all of the systems and help them identify new systems that will work and will be more efficient and that will take Barbados to the top. I want to commend them very, very much, because they are going to take the millions that we have invested in the other ministries, take that and turn it into greater opportunity. That is why every Barbadian must understand that Business Barbados is everybody's business. So the bill is here before us, but the bill by itself will not achieve the objective. There are a number of things that once we pass this bill that we have to put in place in order to convert the idea now into a reality. We are told that a new space for Business Barbados to operate is going to be established, so that you have enough space for the additional staff that now have to be hired to ensure that we have sufficient service capacity to meet the needs not only of current, but you are preparing now that as we continue to pursue our investment strategy through our foreign affairs and foreign trade, Invest Barbados, going to investment conferences here and there, that when we are able to attract people, we have the capacity to service them so that we can convert their interest into real opportunity for Barbadians. So new space has been found, and it's going to be set up in a way that helps with the efficiency of Business Barbados. As a result, the staff will be doubled, and the cost will go up, but it's going to be money well spent because it is invested in giving us capacity to be able to make money now and down in the future. And what we've done to ensure that the process has been fair to them, because this is a commercial state-owned enterprise, it's not central government. The staff at CAIPO are central government. And what we've sought to ensure in the legislation is that staff are going to be transitioned on no less favorable terms than they currently have. And those who wish to stay with central government can choose to so do, and we will find places to reassign them so that they feel comfortable with the choices that they have made and are not disadvantaged in any possible way. They've also done the work for the digital upgrade so that we can have a functioning digital platform that people can use it in order to engage the services that Business Barbados will provide. And I'd already shared with you, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the advisory support services for small businesses and so on. Something else that I just want to draw to your attention that I thought was really good, that by separating the intellectual property unit, it means now you have a dedicated unit that can work with our artists, our musicians, our artists, so that they are going to be able to register their intellectual property. And by registering their intellectual property, they're going to be able to protect it. You hear the stories frequently about music by our local people being used all parts of the world without let or hindrance, and nobody paying a cent to them. They don't get anything for it. And so the end result is that they lose out because the intellectual property is not protected. But by having a dedicated unit, we are going to be able to advise and help and assist them to so do. Now, Section 21 to 27 of the bill deals with the financial provisions, allowing that entity to be able, from the fees that they collect, they'll be able to generate the type of revenue that will be able to help them with their functioning and their own bills and costs. Right now, it generates $7 million a year. With an improved Business Barbados, we anticipate that the revenues are going to increase and that those revenues are going to be properly managed and reported on, and the Auditor General is going to be able to examine what they're doing to ensure that everything is done properly and above board. Now, does the establishment of this bill, the establishment of new space, digital upgrades, does this finish the task? No, ma'am, it does not. We recognize that for this to really work, staff are key. And it's not just employing new people, but it's making sure that they're the best fit for the organization. So I want to commend the Ministry of Energy and Business for working with their team to develop a training plan for all of their staff so that each person is knowledgeable, knows and understands all of the legislation, all of the requirements, and so you're not getting different answers from different people on different days. We're also, within that training, you need to make sure that they have the digital capacity to serve, to be able to use the technology that will be made available to them with an efficiency. But then we want them to serve with warmth. We want them to be helpful and agile. We want them to care. We want this to come out in how they engage the public. We want them to be proactive. We want them to be extra milers. And that can only happen if you put, one, your training plan in place. Secondly, do capacity building for the institution, that it has all that it needs, that the staff can function. Make sure that we reduce the chaos that is around them so that they can function efficiently. And then have an employee improvement plan, which means coaching and monitoring and ensuring that we have the performance metrics that they need so that they know what are the targets they need to meet and the quality of the service that they have to have. So I want to begin closing on this chapter here with Business Barbados 2024. It's another piece in the puzzle that will help us to build a republic that works and that delivers for our people. We're going to be celebrating our 3rd anniversary, November 30th. And I have some advice for the staff that will be a part of Business Barbados, and some advice for Barbadians as I close. The only way we can achieve the objective which we have of converting every single person that has an interest in establishing itself in Barbados, capturing as many of them as possible to start businesses here, is if we treat people well. The writer to the Hebrews says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, people have entertained angels unawares." And I always wondered why they took the time to tell them that, because an angel doesn't appear every day. But what the writer to the Hebrews was trying to impress upon the people, treat people well. Strangers, friends, neighbors, family. If we take this as our motto in Business Barbados, to treat every person well, then we will achieve the objective which we have of building a better Barbados. That angel might be an opportunity, a business that will hire 300 people. That angel might be a tourism person coming in to build a hotel, to help us build out our tourism capacity. That angel might be a small business person who has an innovation and who comes in to get it patented and who comes in to get the guidance. Because if we can support them, they might be able to put Barbados on the map with that particular innovation. Those are our angels. But this is advice not only for Business Barbados, it's for every Barbadian, because we are part of the wider ecosystem. Because those same people, those businesses, those tourists, those foreign investors, those local Barbadians are engaging us at every turn in shops, at the doctor's office, furniture stores, security officers, nurses, receptionists, airport workers. They are encountering us at every turn. And if we can get our people to treat everyone with care, with courtesy, and with love, we are going to make our Barbados experience second to none. And the future of Barbados will be assured. So this independence, as we celebrate our 58th anniversary and our 3rd year as a republic, as we sing the national anthem and engage in all things Barbadian, let us convert the lines into action. Be firm craftsmen of our fate. Let us do it in deed, not just in word. Business Barbados is our business. Let us play our part. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time. Thanks.
Honourable member for question himself.
I'm obliged to you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As always, I listened to the honourable member who introduced what is before this Parliament today. And I always remind this chamber that I try to take notes as faithfully as I can do. And I took several notes reflecting the speech of the honourable member for St. James South. maybe I would have been disappointed if I did not record the usual cliches, fit for purpose, and things of that nature. And the honourable member rather curiously began by making reference to the ministerial statement which preceded her own introduction by a few seconds. Curiously also, the honourable member analogized this present exercise, or the proposed exercise of the corporatization of a government department, with the transition, as the honourable member termed it, from Sewell to Grantley Adams, and of course the references to the airport. Without saying it, of course, the references to modernization. And of course, modernization is a noble enterprise. And I record the honourable member to have said that this corporatization allows the unhindering, that's not the honourable member's words, these are my words. These words represent my interpretation of what the honourable member would have been saying, that the corporatization of this government department unhinders the ability to register businesses. And the honourable member is quoted again as saying that around the world there are trillions of dollars looking for opportunities for investment. And how does business Barbados affect economic growth? Now, these are rather ambitious statements, and this is a rather ambitious objective placed on a government department which shall become a corporation to attract the trillions of dollars that exist across the world. I rather think we have other government departments or other bodies of the state already charged with those responsibilities. But it is a rather ambitious mandate placed on a department which largely, beg your pardon.
Member President James Harris.
Sedation. The honourable member may not have taken quite all the notes he needed. I spoke of Foreign Affairs, Invest Barbados, and all the entities that will seek out the business. That Business Barbados, its job is once we attract it and it comes, to secure it. He might have missed that part of the speech, so I just wanted him not to fall into gross error.
Thanks for the elucidation. Member?
I am sincerely indebted for that elucidation. Now, I was about to say that I wonder if one should place, and I accept the point of elucidation, but I haven't admitted, the honourable member having admitted that she would have placed those mandates and responsibility elsewhere. The staff at this new corporation will now be relieved to hear that it is not their sole and or entire business to attract the trillions of dollars that are around the world looking for opportunities for investment. I can speak to, professionally, of course, I can speak to the history of the department and to explain to the honourable member and to this country why those persons who presently work there would be so relieved, because they have come under a lot of public criticism. And I trust that criticism, and I speak with the other side on this. I trust that that criticism will not follow them into this new entity. So I, like them, would now be relieved to hear that those lofty responsibilities are not now transferred from other departments of this state onto them. Reference was made to, and I'm going to go through the notes that I took from the honorable member's speech before I come to the substance of my contribution. The honorable member made reference to the loan that was announced yesterday with some applause for the government. I think another $500 million. And since the honorable member has raised it, I don't believe, Your Honor, that you will deny me the opportunity to speak to it as well. And Barbadians went to bed last night and woke up this morning hearing that this country is now further indebted, except that the honorable member for St. James South considers it a moment of rejoicing. My own view is that Barbados now seems defined not by its capacity to produce, but by its ability to attract lenders. I don't know if our pride now lies in our ability to attract lenders. Barbadians may legitimately ask the question, where is our industry? And where is the industry that will repay all of these loans? But I don't wish to digress. I don't wish to burden the honorable member's contribution with matters that may not belong to her and may belong to another minister to whom she referred in her presentation. Whoever is the parliamentary representative for the constituency that contains Bridgefield may have sat with some anguish when the honorable member, in a rather broad presentation, said, we have spent $78 million on roads. And that person, that representative, that parliamentary representative for the constituency that contains Bridgefield Road may have sat with some anguish and wondered why a portion of that $78 million could not have reached Bridgefield. But I said before, and I'm going to say it again, ma'am, under your presidency today of this chamber, that the roads that were paved were cricket roads or Kensington roads, so that while we come to this chamber today and we speak about inefficiencies in government departments, I want to remind the honorable member for St. James South that there has been grievous inefficiency attending the matter of road paving, which the honorable member now tells us reached the sum of $78 million. And the people in Bridgefield, who live in Bridgefield, and those who traverse Bridgefield, and those who tell me that they avoid Bridgefield in trying to get home, they spend larger sums on fuel for their cars because they do not wish to spend additional sums on suspensions and shocks and so on. But I do not digress from what is before the chamber today. These are matters that were referred to by the honorable member. And therefore, you, ma'am, will not deny me the opportunity to give direct responses. And one of the the penultimate quote that I noted, the honorable member said, "We build a platform for attracting business." The honorable member will not hear me disagreeing with that, since the department, when we go to other countries, when we consider the situation in other countries, and I know there is rather private admiration. I'm not going to use the word envy. A lot of people who think they envy people really admire them. So that there is some admiration for the jurisdictions of Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos in terms of their ability to attract businesses because of speed, because of efficiencies. And the honorable member, if she intended to focus on that, she is correct that we need a platform, or we need to establish that platform for attracting business. The question that will be asked ultimately of this government by this legislative initiative today is whether it will be said in the future that the government built that platform for attracting business. And I think the honorable member refers to international business, largely speaking. And while referring to international business, with all of its lucrative contributions to this economy, the government will not wish to be heard to say that there is any neglect of local business, because local business also is important in terms of national morale and creating opportunities for young people who are here who wish to be self-employed. And my last quote from the honorable member was that she said, "Business Barbados can make or break our investment strategy." And I am prepared to hold the government to that. In the fullness of time, will it be said that Business Barbados, which we legislate today, which the government legislates today, will it be said that it has made this country's investment strategy, or will it unhappily be said to have broken this government's investment strategy? And we hold the government to what it has promised. Now, those are my responses to direct statements made by the honorable member for St. James South. I wish now, Your Honor, to use some of the experience that I have in the law. I will not conceal myself behind a bushel. I will not be an exponent of any false modesty in here. Of all the lawyers that come in here, I'm the most senior. I've been doing this for 40 years. I speak with authority on the law. There are dentists in here who are among the best dentists in Barbados. There are economists in here who have some merit. There are managers in here who have merit. And I will not be accused of false modesty. I am going to go into this act today, Your Honor, and to teach. And oh yes, that's where we all begin. And the chair, the Honourable Deputy Speaker reminds me that it all begins with teachers. And therefore, Your Honour, the fault is mine in failing to acknowledge teachers. And from all reports, you have been the best, or you have been among the best of them. And you don't have to teach in a tertiary institution to be considered the best. you took them from their infancy and made them into young adults and good adults. And so, therefore, Your Honor, permit me to use my experience to give an exposition on this legislation that comes to the Parliament today. Now, it is normally the duty of a court, if a matter comes before the court, to give interpretation to legislation that has come before the Parliament. In other words, a lawsuit arises out of this legislation, and it is the judge that has to give interpretation to that legislation. In other words, he's asking, what did Parliament intend? What did Parliament mean? And I pause. There are also good doctors in here. I don't want to exhaust the list, but there are good doctors in here. And they will not hide their light under a bushel. Today, there's a lawyer speaking. Please let him be heard, Madam Deputy Speaker. And so, when a court is trying to interpret an act of Parliament, it may go to something they call the long title. This legislation seems not to contain a long title. A long title is that portion of legislation which explains its purpose, so that for some reason this legislation is deficient in that regard. So what do we do? As a Parliament and as an opposition, doing a critique of this legislation, and I'm entitled to do critiques. And I will not relent in doing critiques of the government's work. This is not personal engagement. I left here last week wondering at the extent of personal engagement. And I will resist any urge or temptation, and there is none at my age and stage in life. You attack me personally, down my back, down my impervious back, and I go home and come back today. I don't come in here to attack anybody personally. I shouldn't. It is beneath the standards of this chamber. So please, Your Honor, let me proceed. I'm so glad you're here today. Now, every bill, this is the bill, gives explanation to the bill that will become an act of Parliament. Here's what that section of the bill says. Now, I read this because what is written here will not appear in the instrument when it becomes an act of Parliament and when it becomes the law of Barbados. So what I'm reading here is for the guidance of this Parliament, not for the guidance of a court, not for the guidance of a public, because after this becomes law, what I read here now will not appear within the instrument. Let me read it though, Your Honor. An act to establish a body corporate to be known as Business Barbados by coordinating and carrying out functions in relation to specified corporate and intellectual property enactments and to provide for related matters. Now, having read that, it speaks in English. I can read it a second time and try to understand what it is saying. I can read it a second time and try to get the essence of it. And so that it will not bypass you, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to try to read it again to see if you can extrapolate some meaning from it. Permit me. I know the rules, the standing orders and so on. There are a lot of experts in here on standing orders. Well, ask the experts to allow me to repeat this, because this is important. An act to establish a body corporate to be known as Business Barbados by coordinating and carrying out functions in relation to specified corporate and intellectual property enactments and to provide for related matters. I've read it a second time, ma'am, and you and I may still have some difficulty as to precisely what it means. So let us bypass that and go to the short title. Now, when a bill has a section that explains, and that explanation remains vague, you may go to the long title. And generally speaking, long titles don't remain vague. They're telling you what this legislation is about. Legislation is not an instrument intending to speak to lawyers or judges. Legislation speaks to the public writ large. It speaks to everybody. That's why they write it in English. And so, the short title, if the explanation to the bill is deficient, and if the bill, which will become an act of parliament, is deficient in terms of a long title, let us go to the short title. And the short title reads, as short titles read, it reads with brevity, this act may be cited as the Business Barbados Act 2024. All well and good. So in a few hours, we will have a Business Barbados Act. But what is its purpose? I may then have to go back to what the Honourable Member for St. James South said, and I quoted her in saying that after this act is passed, maybe we will be more attractive we as Barbados will become more attractive as an allure for the trillions of dollars that are looking for opportunities for investment. And with this new legislation, we may even find ourselves in an environment in which economic growth is affected or affected. And that this legislation will become that platform for attracting business. Historically, this department, we used to call it corporate affairs years ago. And as societies develop and modernize and business becomes more sophisticated and modernized, added to corporate affairs was intellectual property, because intellectual property represents a vast component of property which may be owned by persons, human or corporate. So it became the term CIPO. That was the acronym, Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office. But I said all of that to say that historically, this government department was run by a lawyer. And that lawyer was a registrar as part of the established public service of this country. This is to give a historical account of that department, which has been so pilloried by some members of the public. And it used to be run by a lawyer who I believe became the Registrar of Corporate Affairs. So that lawyer was a lawyer. She was functioning, and I say she because in latter years it has, with the preponderance of females coming to the bar, not at the expense, but in larger numbers than males, a lot of these departments have now tended to be headed by ladies because there are more female lawyers than there are male lawyers. And that lawyer had to be a manager of a department, and she had to be a lawyer so that the functions were dual. And nothing could leave that department unless that lawyer unless that manager of that department, lawyer manager happening to be the same person, gave final approval. I think they used to actually sign the document or delegated someone to sign. Now, what drew my attention was when the honorable member for St. James South said that sections 13 and 14 of this act, yes, sections 13 and 14 of this act establishes quasi-judicial functionaries. Not her words precisely, but I'm giving interpretation to what the honorable member said. That quasi-judicial functionaries are established under this act, and she's correct. Because when the department used to be headed, as it is today, this very minute, when it was headed by a lawyer, by a registrar, by a manager, but essentially by a lawyer who was called a registrar, that person exercised a quasi-judicial function. The honorable member is correct. Like the Fair Trading Commission, they exercise a quasi-judicial function, except that last week here I heard that it was the government that gave a decision in relation to the light and power rate increase. I heard that in here last week. I have it on record. Go on YouTube and you can see it. We all thought that the Fair Trading Commission used to exercise the quasi-judicial function of giving rate increases, but a boast was made in here last week that it was the government that gave it. And when the time comes, I'm going to take the people of Barbados to other literature, to other statements made by subordinate ministers, which prove and confirm that the government may well have had some involvement in that decision, which is going to cause Barbadians to pay higher light bills. But let us not digress, Your Honor. I was saying that the honorable member for St. James South was correct when she indicated to this chamber and to this country that sections 13 and 14 of the proposed new legislation establish quasi-judicial functionaries. Beg your pardon, ma'am. Now, this act becomes problematic. That is, you may say that is a personal and professional opinion, which I can express quite blandly, but you, ma'am, would call upon me to prove it. Let us go to sections 13 and 14 as indicated by the honorable member for St. James South. And it speaks to the functions of the registrar. The registrar is responsible for administering and ensuring compliance with this act and the specified enactment set out in the first schedule. B, the registrar is responsible for advising the chief executive officer and the board on legal matters relating to the specified enactments referred to at paragraph A, the preceding paragraph to which I referred. And C, this one is rather curious. The registrar is responsible for instituting legal proceedings in matters relating to breaches of the specified enactments referred to in paragraph A after consultation with the board, so that we are now, this legislation is now fixing the registrar with the status of being a party to legal proceedings if he or she thinks that the need arises. Rather curious, but I wouldn't delay you with that, Your Honor. D, the registrar is responsible for doing any other act or thing required to be done by the Chief Executive Officer. Now, this is where the department becomes so differently and fundamentally and substantially constituted. As I said, ma'am, I traced the history. The registrar, in layman's terms, in ordinary parlance, he or she was the boss. It was a legal department, whatever we think of it, and whatever the Honourable Member for St. James South thinks of it, this was a legal department. This was a department that was given registration, and not only registration, but life and legal validity to corporations, to entities. And so you had a lawyer running the department. And I am not aware that this department will depart from those duties. It will remain a department that gives life to corporate entities. That is substantially what will be its purpose, its continued purpose. But now we have inserted into this department a chief executive officer. A chief executive officer. And that chief executive officer, within the organizational structure, is the boss of the person who used to head the legal department. Unless, of course, the government proposes to make one of those lawyers former registrar or deputy registrar, unless this government proposes to make one of them the CEO. We're hearing echoes of BTMI. We're hearing echoes of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We're hearing echoes of hope, in which this government has seen it fit in a country filled with educated people to recolonize our state institutions. In the event that I'm misunderstood, mine is a voice in defense of education in this country. Mine is a voice in defense of the educated young people in this country. Mine is a voice in defense of the educated young people in this country who are no less competent nor qualified than anybody who is brought in to recolonize these bodies of the state. And I repeat, with a warning to the government that hearing the echoes of BTMI, Hope, and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, if you're going to name a CEO, find one of the 10,000 people who are well qualified in Barbados, who are as well qualified as the 30 of us who believe that we are well qualified to come in here and represent people. Yet we don't believe that the 10,000 young people out there are qualified to run state corporations in this country. Because every time we're naming a CEO, I remember the episode with BTMI. The only thing they didn't say about him is that he was God. Don't know if he came like a thief in the night, but he came. And no Minister of Tourism in this country within the last 6 years would tell you that he delivered any glad tidings. Came quietly. You know nobody remembers him. You know nobody thinks of him. But he came to this country in a blaze of glory. And this is not personal. I met him This is a principal position in defense of our institution of education. And this government continues to demonstrate to the people of Barbados that it has no confidence in the people of Barbados. I haven't departed from this legislation, ma'am. This legislation is providing for a CEO to sit atop a registrar, or two, or three. I ask again, will this government promote one of those registrars to the office of CEO, or will we again have the return of these super people? They've heard me before quote a member of the government who said that we're looking for the best brains and the best minds. I mean, I said it before and I'm going to say it again. I have never heard such self-deprecation. I have never heard a statement of worse self-negation. That you justify an appointment of somebody you know nothing or little about. And you tell the country you are looking for the best minds. What is the best mind? Where is it made? Where is it made, ma'am? Somewhere that mankind has never gone? Mars? Because we went to the moon. So the best minds are not up there. They're getting these best minds from somewhere. Well, go up to the QEH today. It's not personal, but I must have courage in doing this job. I must have courage. And I must ask the people of this country if the Hope Corporation is any better run than any of these 29 people in this government could run their constituencies. They're well qualified. The people say that. The people say to all of us, we want you. And we believe ourselves well qualified to do this work. And we can't look at another Barbadian who put us in this position and say to him that he is also well qualified to head the QEH or to head Hope or to head the BTMI at the time. And I must come in here and skin my teeth when the week comes. Because I'm looking for popularity. Well, I don't want any popularity. Principle, Your Honor. Principle. And so mine is a warning to this government that when it establishes Business Barbados, this is early warning. Treat this as an early warning system. Find a national of this space called the Caribbean. Find a national of this space from Jamaica down to Guyana, since we're CARICOM. Find one and stop this practice of national self-negation in which you're telling the young people in this country that they're not fit. Bachelors and masters and PhDs. And you importing these people. And again, it's not a personal attack. It's not a personal attack, but we have children too. And one day we will have grandchildren too, who will repay the loans, and great-grandchildren. What account will we give to them? What will we say to them that we did while we were on this business? That we exported the leadership of our important state institutions to certain people? That's what we're going to say to them? Treat this government as an early warning that I bring attention to Business Barbados, which intends to hire and to employ a chief executive officer, that chief executive officer must come from within this Caribbean space. This is not nationalist bigotry. This is a recognition of our worth as a people. And we have spent too much time Too much time denying to our people their worth. And so I come back to the technicalities of the act. That was an intervention. That was an intervention designed to give warning to this government that the people are watching you. And that if you want the people to highly regard you as a government, reciprocate with some high regard for them in terms of their competence and abilities and their qualification. Beg your pardon? The people put us here. Beg your pardon, ma'am? Thank you, ma'am. The people put us here because they felt that we were capable. Show the people that they are capable. Show the people that they are capable. That's an early warning system. Yes. Yes. I come back to the technical aspects of this act, Your Honor. And I was at the point where I was saying that in a department previously run by a lawyer, a functionary called a lawyer, managed by that functionary called a registrar, that lawyer now sits in administrative subordinacy to a CEO. Having disclosed that, here's what the legislation is saying about the CEO. And that is at section 13. Beg your pardon, ma'am. Section 12. Section 12. The functions of the registrar are explained, articulated at section 13 of the legislation, the bill, and the functions of the chief executive officer are articulated at section 12. I don't think I read what are the functions of the registrar, but I'll read them, ma'am. The registrar is responsible for administering and ensuring compliance with this act and the specified enactments set out in the first schedule. B, advising the chief executive officer and the board on legal matters relating to the specified enactments referred to at paragraph A. So already we have an indication that the CEO doesn't have to be fixed with legal expertise because the registrar is advising him or her on legal matters. So that CEO can come with qualifications in business and accounts and related areas of human endeavor. As I've said before, the registrar has the power to initiate legal proceedings, and 13(1)(d), the registrar is responsible for doing any other act or thing required to be done by the chief executive officer. So there is no doubt, there is absolutely no doubt that the registrar is administratively, under this legislation, subordinate to the chief executive officer. And that chief executive officer does not have to be a lawyer because the registrar advises him or her on legal matters. I repeat, this is an opportunity for the government to insert at the top of that administration a chief executive officer who is not a lawyer, but who will be qualified. And I'm going to say it for the third time. We have a lot of qualified people in this Caribbean space. Find one! Find one! The functions of the Chief Executive Officer are articulated at Section 12. Not going to read all of them, but the one that may attract some interest and attention, and I bring this to the Honourable Member for St. James South, who introduced what is before us. Here is what Section 12, subsection 3 says, and this is pertaining to the functions of the Chief Executive Officer. Now, it says that the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, in the exercise of her or his functions, remains subject to the directions of the board. The board, not the minister, the board. But then it goes on to say, notwithstanding the fact that the CEO is subject to the directions of the board shall not give directions to the Chief Executive Officer, Registrar, Director of Intellectual Property, or any other person with respect to the administration of any of the specified enactments, and in particular, in the exercise of a function conferred or delegated under any of the specified enactments. That is limiting the power of the board in relation to the functions of the CEO, the registrar, the director of intellectual property, or any other persons within the administration. That's rather curious, though. You know, ma'am, you're experienced in government. You know that normally when you have a board, whether under a minister or otherwise, the persons in charge of the executive functions normally are subordinate and directly subordinate to the board. And often they will take directions from the board. Here's this legislation telling the CEO, the registrar, and the director that there are instances in which they are not subject to the directions of the board. Now, John Milton, many years ago, wrote a Paradise Lost. And the most famous quote from Paradise Lost was, route on route, ruin upon ruin, confusion worse confounded. Route on route, ruin upon ruin, confusion worse confounded. Here is an administrative design in which this legislation seems to be creating what I can only call petty sovereignties, petty fiefdoms. Everybody's going in their own direction. The CEO going to the left, the registrar going to the right, the board somewhere else off looking on, because the CEO and the registrar, they're not obliged to take any directions from the board under this legislation in relation to certain matters. So I want to say to the government, and the criticism remains constructive. I don't care who is the draftsman. It matters not to me. I don't care who is the minister. I am indifferent to that. I am speaking law and administration. And I am saying that this legislation, as presently constituted, offers potential for confusion and disorder, the creation of petty sovereignties, petty fiefdoms within the administration that is contemplated. That this person doesn't have to take directions from that person, except that that person is a board. Perhaps a chairman of a board. Where are their teeth? So that, I wonder if the government is so humble as to revisit this legislation. Not because anybody has been mischievous. I don't think anybody has been mischievous. But I think this well fits in with the Paradise Lost that John Milton wrote about. Route on route, ruin upon ruin, confusion worse confounded. And if there's any doubt, Your Honor, as to the possibility for confusion, the act seems to be creating the chaos. Explicitly, I take you, Your Honor, to section 10, subsection 2 of the legislation. Now that section 10 speaks as to the staff of Business Barbados and the establishment of divisions. So that it's quite reasonable that you will have and can have divisions within a corporation. Division of labor. And that John is responsible for that, Mary is responsible for that, but then they all report to the CEO, and the CEO becomes answerable or sits under the direction of a board. But I've demonstrated to you that this act itself is saying that in certain matters, no, the board cannot give directions in relation to certain important matters. So here's the potential for confusion. Here's the potential for chaos within an organization which is supposed to engender confidence in investors. That's where we are. And I listen to every word. And I listen to the noble intent of the honourable member for St. James South, who probably meant well. But when we begin to deconstruct and to dissect the legislation, it is a recipe for confusion. And that's why I quoted John Milton's Paradise Lost. I go back to section 10 of the legislation, man.
Madam Deputy Speaker.
Beg your pardon.
I'm a little concerned because I stand on a point of order. The honourable member is misleading the chamber, and I suspect he may have misled himself by not reading properly this bill. The bill clearly states that the Chief Executive Officer is subject to the board, and it clearly states, going to it now, in subsection 2 of section 12, it clearly states the Chief Executive Officer is in the exercise of the Chief Executive Officer's function subject to the directions of the board. Then in sections 13 and sections 14, where it outlines the functions of the registrar and the director of intellectual property, it says that where they have to deal with judicial matters coming from out of a law, that the board, the same one that you read, subsection 2 of section 13, and it's in the same position for the director of intellectual property, that if the law says X, Y, and Z, the board nor the CEO cannot tell the directors that they're not to do it. It is like what happens in a hospital. You have a chief executive officer, but that chief executive officer cannot call a doctor and tell the doctor how to administer, diagnose, prescribe, or deal with a patient. That is outside of the purview of the CEO. Now, I recognize that He may have thought it might cause confusion because they were unable to work out these matters in the Democratic Labour Party as to what was to happen with him in here and the other person being president, and they were confused, and it resulted in, and I understand his need for us not to fall into chaos, right? So I appreciate the concern, but I just want to reassure him that this legislation does not create chaos, for the simple reason that it ensures that when it comes to the law, that no one interferes with the directors who have to execute judgment on the law.
I was fully prepared to take the intervention seriously until the Honourable Member talked foolishness about George Street. Look, let's take this. Look, we are bringing legislation before the people of Barbados.
Honourable member, please.
Oh, I'm shouting too much for you, ma'am?
No, sir.
Oh,
Please do not accuse any honourable member here of talking foolishness.
of talking foolishness.
Yes, sir. We are
So
all
the
here.
reference made to George Street, isn't that foolishness when we are trying to debate a piece of legislation?
Honourable member, let us do it together.
Yes.
We're fighting
Yes.
the same cause.
Yes.
Or working towards the best result.
Yes.
But we are all here, honourable members. So please watch your adjectives, sir.
Yes, I'll watch.
Thank
And
you.
the nouns too. And the nouns. Adjectives are nouns.
And the pronouns.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And I was indicating to the Honourable Member for St. James South that I was quite prepared to take the intervention seriously until, and this word will please you,
And you've been going well.
until it degenerated.
Don't spoil it.
Excellent word, isn't it, Your Honor?
Don't spoil it, sir.
Degenerated. And I was looking forward to the dialectical approach. The thesis, the antithesis, and hopefully we will arrive at the synthesis. And she doesn't have to be a communist to know that.
Honourable member, the honourable member.
In fact, I don't think she's a communist. Never has been. She's not even a socialist.
Will you continue, sir?
But she understands the dialectic. Now, when the Honourable Member attempted to clarify by reference to subsection 2, in which reads, the Chief Executive Officer and this is subsection 2 of section 12. And she read that, and those who did not understand what she was saying applauded. And those who understood what she was saying remained silent. And here's what the Honourable Member was saying. That under the functions of Chief Executive Officer, at subsection 2 it says, the Chief Executive Officer is in the exercise of the Chief Executive Officer's functions subject to the directions of the board. So that the Honourable Member made reference to that to contradict the point I was making. And the Honourable Member is saying to you, ma'am, and to this country, no. What he is saying is not true. This legislation says that the CEO is subject to the directions of the board. That is what it reads. But I brought the Honourable Member to the section, the subsection, which comes immediately after. And it is written in English, and I'm going to read it for her, and for you, and for the people of Barbados, ma'am. It says, notwithstanding subsection 2, which is what the Honourable Member read, the board shall not give directions to the CEO, registrar, director of intellectual property, or any other person with respect to the administration of any of the specified enactments, and in particular, in the exercise of a function conferred or delegated by under any of the specified enactments. So that subsection 3 is an exception to the subsection that the Honourable Member read. It does not stop at subsection 2, Your Honour. The legislation goes on to provide for cases in which the registrar is not subject to the directions of the board. Now, if the honorable member say to this chamber and analogize with reference to professional undertakings that you can't, in other words, the CEO at the hospital can't tell a surgeon how to cut, that's an excellent analogy. And two persons to your left would confirm that. You can't tell the dentist how to go into your jawbone. You're only out at the front. You own the building and the dental place, but you can't come in there and tell the dentist how to pull out somebody's tooth. But my argument is that subsection 3, which creates the subsection, is vague. It is general. Read the last sentence. In the exercise of a function conferred or delegated under any of the specified enactments. A recipe of vagueness, cooking a meal of confusion. Route on route, ruin upon ruin, confusion, worse, confounded. So please leave George Street alone. If you're curious, come. You got on blue as it is anyhow. You're ready. Now, this board, I'm taking the honorable member back to the legislation. She made an excellent political speech. So do not be discomfited now that I take you into the technical aspects of the legislation. Ma'am, that's my training. And if the honorable member came here without the benefit of legal advice, I'm sorry. I can't be out here and out there too. And I'm trying to help the other side with some legal interventions.
Something to be missing over here.
Something missing out there.
You seem to be missing. Come over.
Miss it? I see it and I miss it. I bypass it.
And you miss it.
I don't miss it in that sense.
Carry on smartly, sir.
You see how often I smile in here, man?
Because I'm here.
Well, apart from that.
The charm is
Well, I smile more when you're in the chair.
The charm is flowing over from
Yes.
you to me and me to you. Continue, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You're very kind. The board of this new business Barbados is established at Section 7 of the Act. It reads, there is established a board to be known as the Business Barbados Board, which shall be responsible for the policy, organization, and administration of Business Barbados. Now, this same board, that this legislation is telling that it is responsible for the administration of Business Barbados, this same board is told at Section 12, subsection 3, that although it is responsible for the administration of Business Barbados, it shall not give directions to high-level functionaries in certain circumstances. That is why I quoted John Milton. Look, it is one thing to write beautiful legislation. It is one thing for legislation to prescribe beautifully. But ma'am, you know how human beings are when they get involved in the process. People in this country apparently fight for car park space. And that's only a space outside to stop the car from getting the sun on the roof. People fight over car park space. You take well-meaning public servants and put them into this space. Into this space, where on the one hand you're telling them you're a law unto yourself. There are certain matters in which The CEO has no control over you. The board has no control over you. That's a human being. That's a human being, ma'am. You've worked with human beings in the school and in politics, and you know what we are like. I say we am one. You know what we are like. In short, this act creates administrative confusion. And if the government doesn't wish to admit that, fine. But I'm not going to withdraw from my position. It creates administrative confusion.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not quite sure.
What do you
Rise
raise
on a
it-
point
what
of
do you
order.
stand, ma'am?
I'm not quite sure how long the honourable member will go on, and I don't really want the mischief to go out from here. The very same piece that he read in relation to the board, the chief executive officer, the section 3 of 12, notwithstanding subsection 2, the board shall not give directions to the chief executive officer or registrar. It is the same thing as you find in 13 and 14, which says, if there is a matter of law in which they are instructed that they must behave in a particular way, then the board cannot interfere with either of the three. The chief executive officer cannot interfere with either of the two. It does not create confusion unless he has no confidence in the professionalism and training of persons who take those positions to understand where their cutoff line is. I can assure you that there's no confusion at the hospital between the chief executive officer and giving instructions to anybody about medical matters. And there will be no confusion between the board or the chief executive officer pertaining to any matter that by law, chief executive officer, registrar, director of intellectual property, any law that instructs them how to act, they know what they have to do and what they cannot do. So I want him to be reassured. I know that he's struggling to find something to be pompous about, but you know.
Thank you for your point of
perfectly
elucidation.
all right.
Thank you for your point of elucidation. Honourable member for Shirts.
I'm not sure whether it was a point of order, point of elucidation, but I accept it. Point of order. Thank you. Now, I don't think that the honourable member is contradicting me, since she is conceding that there are areas in which the CEO does not have to take directions from the board. She's conceding that. And I don't know if she's conceding this, but there are general words at the end of the subsection, and I will read the general words. In the exercise of a function conferred or delegated under any of the specified enactments. It is broad. They haven't listed them here. It is subject to the interpretation of the CEO. It is subject to the interpretation of the board. And all I'm saying to the honourable member is that there will be circumstances, human beings functioning as they are, will have their own interpretations as to what are their functions and as to who is trespassing. And any time you find legislation, Your Honour, and I want the honourable member to hear this, which presents vagueness in relation to conduct, to administrative conduct, it becomes subject to personal or individual interpretation. That's all I'm telling the honourable member, that this legislation is creating a recipe for confusion. And it does it at section 13, beg your pardon, it does it at section 12, subsection 3, And it does it at section 13, subsection 2. Subsection 12 refers to the functions of the chief executive officer, and I will say it plainly. Section 12 tells the chief executive officer that in certain circumstances, he or she is not subject to the directions of the board. It says that. You know, it goes on then, section 13, to the registrar. And it articulates the functions of the registrar. And then, as obtains with the chief executive officer, this legislation also gives to the registrar an opportunity to say, but I am not answerable to the chief executive officer. So you're here telling the chief executive officer that there are circumstances, general or specific, you decide, in which he or she is not answerable to the board. Doesn't have to follow the directions of the board. You know, the same legislation in the next section goes on to tell the registrar that he or she, and they don't talk about directions now, they say is not answerable. And I'm going to read it, Your Honor. I'm going to read it for the honourable member for St. James South. You're hearing it for the first time when I spoke. We heard a beautiful speech about investment and trillions and all kinds of things. All kinds of things that don't exist in reality. What trillions are what? The only trillions you are talking about is reparations. Functions of registrar. Those functions of the registrar are articulated at section 13, subsection 1, A, B, C, and D. I want the honourable member for St. James South to listen to this carefully. When the legislation speaks of the functions of the registrar, it says at 13.1d that the registrar is responsible for doing any other act or thing required to be done by the chief executive officer. Under functions, the registrar is told that he or she must do any other act or thing required to be done by the chief executive officer. Here's what the next section says. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary in this act, but subject to subsection 1B and C, and any provision of the specified enactment in the first schedule, the registrar shall not be answerable to the chief executive officer, the board, or the minister in the exercise of the duties, obligations, powers, or rights conferred on the registrar by any of the specified enactments in the same legislation. The legislation just tells the registrar that he or she must do any act or thing required to be done by the chief executive officer. The section that follows immediately after that uses the word not answerable to. Not answerable to, section 13, subsection 2. Subsection 1 of section 13 says to the registrar, look, you have to abide by these responsibilities. And in abiding by these responsibilities, you must do any act or thing required to be done by the chief executive officer. The very next section says to the registrar that she is not answerable to the chief executive officer, the board, or the minister in the exercise of her duties, obligations, powers, or rights conferred on the registrar by any of the specified enactments. General, again, general words, swinging wide. So on the one hand, you have to do what the CEO tells you to do. In the very next section, you're not answerable to him in relation to enactments. What are these enactments? You see, legislation, you have a duty in doing legislation. They got a quorum in here. Do you have a quorum, ma'am? Beg your pardon?
We do.
You do. I like the public to know how things are here shaping up.
It's a good thing. You've never been here so long before, so you would not know. So we are happy that you're asking.
You know, they tell
and
me,
I'm gladly letting you know.
they come in here every week, man,
We
he
do have
don't
a
read the
quorum.
rules. He doesn't know the standing orders, and that's a recitation among them.
We do have more than a quorum.
He
And
don't
we're
know the
all
standing
listening.
orders.
We're listening attentively to your
So whenever I
presentation.
see these things, the public will know how they're behaving. Because on YouTube, they only got me. But if I talk about the other business that is going on in here, they tell me I don't know the standing orders.
We do have a quorum though. And if you leave, we will still have one.
They're all over Barbados on Tuesdays.
We will still have one.
All over Barbados on
If
Tuesdays.
you exit now, sir, we will still have a quorum.
If I do what, ma'am?
If you exit the building now, we will still have a quorum. But
You
we're
would-
listening
if
to
I
you.
exited?
But we're listening to you attentively.
Well, let the public
So carry on,
understand
sir.
all this thing about standing
No,
orders.
no, we're not
I
allowed
can't
it.
come in here and tell the public.
That is your authority.
I can't come in here and tell the public how they're behaving.
Of course you do.
Right, I'm going to tell the public how they're behaving, and that's why I asked you if we have a quorum.
But we do have a quorum, sir, and if you
Right.
exit now,
Right.
we would still have a quorum.
Well, the public has heard that.
Therefore,
Because YouTube only focusing on the two of us.
let us continue with the focus.
Let us
with what we're
continue.
discussing. Yes, sir.
Let us continue. They want to misbehave, and the public must not know. Every time a plane takes off at Grantley Adams, you're struggling to get a quorum in here.
Honourable member, please do not reflect on that because it is not in keeping with what we know. Otherwise, there will be no sitting at this moment. We do exceed the numbers for a quorum. And you are casting aspersions now on my management, which would mean that I am denying, or excuse me, that I am not observing and directing this chamber in the way it should be managed. We do have a quorum.
It's just helping you with the count, ma'am. You know I like to help you.
Sir, no man can help me, even especially a short man. It can't work. It can't work, sir. It can't work, sir. But let us carry on in good faith.
Let us carry on
Yes,
in good
please.
faith, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Let us carry on with the quorum that we have. Now, we were at the point when we were saying that the act appears to give powers to the board and to the CEO, and then the same act appears to be withdrawing those powers from the board and or the CEO by the use of the words not answerable to, not subject to the directions. And that is why I believe my comment is fair and objective. I believe it is fair and objective that you are creating a situation for possible confusion, possible conflict, possible chaos. You are creating a situation of which John Milton wrote about in Paradise Lost. Rout on rout, ruin upon ruin, confusion, worse, confounded. And which CEO will go up there and decide that he has a free hand? Let us not belabor the point. So that we spoke about the board and its functions. That board is established at section 7. And we need not read that. But what are the functions of the board? And those functions are mentioned at section 8, Your Honor. A to D establishes the functions of the board, or describes, I beg your pardon, the functions of the board. The board is established at section 7. There's no difficulty with that. But in terms of the functions of the board, that is contained at section 8 of the legislation. Here are those functions, Your Honor. The functions of the board are the appointment of staff to Business Barbados and the management thereof. I will go to C deliberately. The development of policies for the prudent and efficient management of Business Barbados. This is the board. Presumably, the board is a non-executive organ within Business Barbados. D, the monitoring of the performance of Business Barbados in respect of the discharge of its functions. Let us read that and consider it, because that is the function of most boards. So let us read it again, Your Honor. The function of this fourth function of the board is the monitoring of the performance of Business Barbados in respect of the discharge of its functions, supervisory, overviewing. And you know, ma'am, non-executive. We all know this, that boards tend to be non-executive. They only give them a little office, well, not a little office, they give them an office with a long table, 2 coffee machines, you get lemonade and cake, you go up there once a month, and depending on the quality of your chairmanship, I wouldn't say what they do. I will leave that alone. But boards are non-executive. They function as in a supervisory manner. They function to overview the work of the organization. And that is why that section is so apt. The monitoring of the performance of Business Barbados in respect of the discharge of its functions. But here, this government has inserted another function. 8.1b. Now, I suspect you, with your vast experience, ma'am, you know about boards and you know how boards function and you know the relationship between the minister and the board. The minister puts the board there to see that the thing is running well. And when you have board meetings, you bring the CEO, because the CEO gives account to the board on behalf of the executives and the organization generally. So that is the hierarchy. Minister, board, CEO. And boards are non-executive. As we assume that this board is non-executive, but here's 8.1b. Let us read it, Your Honor. The functions of the board are the management of the resources and contracts of Business Barbados. Now, in the presence of the honorable member who led off this debate, who has risen to her feet more than once to offer a point of elucidation, the member who is well steeped in business and administration, well steeped, this honorable member has made a name for herself in this polity as someone well steeped in business. And if the honorable member does not rise to her feet again, we can conclude that she does not understand it or she has not read it. I will not accuse her of not understanding anything. I will not do that. I am not here to do that. But she has the opportunity, the honorable member has an opportunity to rise to her feet now or in response to say whether 8.1b is an executive function or whether it is a function normally associated with boards of management. I will read it again, 8.1b. The functions of this board include the management of the resources and contracts of Business Barbados. So when I quoted John Milton, they thought I was joking. You have a board that is now managing a board, ma'am. Non-executive persons, or are they? Because this seems like an executive function to me. That if you're managing contracts of Business Barbados, and if that is stipulated in the legislation expressly, it is there, it's not done by implication, that seems to me to be an executive function. So that when I accuse this government of bringing legislation here, which is in keeping with the fall of the angels into doom, further to what John Milton wrote, Paradise Lost, it seems that what we have now, we are going to lose it by this legislation. If it is paradise now, we are losing it. Because the registrar running up there now. But this government now proposes to institute a body where the various duties are vague and create confusion, route on route, ruin upon ruin, confusion, worse, confounded. And I say to this government, ma'am, that Section 81B of the legislation fixes the board with an executive responsibility. Who will explain that? Who among this government, including the member that led off this legislation, who will explain that? I was interrupted several times. I welcome an interruption now. Not a word. Not a word. I press on. I invited it, not a word. Perhaps they'll explain it in the other place. Let us take them, Your Honor, to Section 9. More confusion. The board may delegate such of its functions as it thinks expedient for the purpose of effectively transacting the business of the board to the chairman, a committee of the board, or the chief executive officer of Business Barbados. Now, you know, when you read things, people don't assimilate it all at the same time. But this one is saying to the board that I accuse under this legislation of usurping executive functions of the CEO by taking those functions unto itself, managing contracts. It now says that that board, with those functions, and I again accuse them of giving a board executive functions, so they appear to withdraw from that and say to the board, oh, you may delegate such of your functions as you think expedient for the purpose of effectively transacting the business of the board. And when I say that this legislation is creating administrative confusion in that department, I mean it. Here's the evidence. You are giving duties to a board that it ought not to have. And I say they're executive functions. And then in the section that follows immediately after, you recognize that, you acknowledge that, and says to the board, okay, well, you may delegate those functions. In other words, hand them down to somebody else. Hand them down according to their discretion. And here are the persons to whom that board fixing itself. Well, it doesn't fix itself. The legislation fixes it with that responsibility. And here is that board, having been fixed with executive functions, now being told that it can delegate, hand down some of those functions to these persons. The chairman. The chairman, ma'am, you have a board. How many people they have on the board? You have a board, ma'am, headed by a chairman. And in the normal course of things, a board that offers supervisory functions to report back to the cabinet, to give account for the state of things. And you have executive authority within the body, a CEO and three registrars, and other middle management people, and people at the lower level. And then you say to the board that it can delegate functions to a chairman. Ma'am, you understand what this legislation is doing to proper administration in Barbados? And they're walking about telling people that this is a platform for good business. Creating a lot of confusion in the people's place. That's what they're doing. Well, y'all don't leave the people alone, eh? Well, you don't come back with good legislation, beg your pardon? All right. I can take it, you know. I can take it. I can take it. I can take it, ma'am. Well, if I share your lashes, I must expect some. They're not dead, you know. They're not dead. And I like to encourage them to speak because I know they don't speak on Thursdays. So that when they come in here on Tuesdays, man, and they're laughing and carrying on and thumping tables, not one of them can speak at a cabinet meeting. Not one. So laugh, my brothers. Enjoy yourselves. I am helping their therapeutic exercise. I want them to speak. Sometimes there are times when I thought they had lost the ability to speak. So I like when they're shouting at me, and you realize, ma'am, I don't even object. I love them. And it is because I love them that I want to see them happy.
I believe they want you to focus on some of the benefits of this same legislation.
And if Tuesdays, yes, ma'am.
And we'll pay attention to that.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
They're worthy of love. And I demonstrate my love by encouraging them to speak on Tuesdays. Give me a call on Thursday and tell me how you're doing, though. Thursday night, tell me how the day was. Can't say a word.
It seems as though you want to come back home.
Can't say a word.
We love you dearly. Continue,
you love
sir.
me too, ma'am.
Continue, your honorable member.
Well, let us keep this climate of love. And let me accuse them, this government, not them, let me accuse this government of creating confusion, of bringing legislation here which is saying to a chairman of a board that he can ask his board to delegate executive functions to him as chairman. That is dangerous. That is very dangerous. But that is in keeping with what is emerging in Barbados in recent times. Authoritarianism. Man, why y'all don't let the board function? Eh? And if you pick your favorite chairman, you can telephone him and tell him, look, ignore the board, delegate that to yourself. Take hold of that. That is what this legislation is saying. We have a matter up there that we want you to take into your own hands. And they know that what I'm saying is correct. They know that this is empowering a minister. Just like the utilities regulations did empower a minister and marginalize the Fair Trading Corporation. That's what this government is about. But I don't accuse these ones in here. We know where it is coming from. And I'm not afraid to say it. They could curse me. They could tell me all kinds of things about myself. But they're going to hear the truth. And I ain't cursing one of them. Nor that one. I'm not going to curse that one. And here's not for that. Let me proceed, ma'am. May I proceed, ma'am?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
So here's a board permitting the chairman to take on executive functions. I make no apology for saying that. Or the legislation is telling the board that it may delegate those executive functions to a committee of the board. What are they proposing to do with the lives of these public servants? And they go further. They're saying to the board that it may give some of its functions to the chief executive officer. So that here you have an organization that is supposed to be running harmoniously, and a chairman of a board or both is being permitted to extract from within the organization certain persons and giving those persons those functions. That is why I spoke of human nature. That you have an organization with proper divisions of labor, proper divisions of administrative involvement. And you picking out some people and saying, I want you to do so and so. Whether it is mischief or not, I want you to do it. And the legislation itself says contracts, dealing with contracts, dealing with contracts. And the public of Barbados knows how sensitive is the issue of awarding contracts. The public of Barbados knows how serious and sensitive is the issue pertaining to the award of contracts by government. Government is the single richest corporation in this country, collects millions of dollars per week. No other business in Barbados located in Barbados makes as much profit as government. And so that when government begins to award contracts, it can award lucrative contracts not to its enemies, but to its friends and families. And recently they've been adding another word, but that is not for here. Indeed not. So why do you think this legislation is removing the question of contracts away from the CEO, away from the registrars, and giving it to the board? And even then, it is removing the issue of those contracts from the board and telling the board that it may ask the chairman or the CEO to deal with the matter of contracts individually. And unless there's an opposition to come in here and point at these things, the public believes that this is just another piece of corporate legislation. Let it slide. That there's nothing untoward about it. But here's the legislation itself. And I'm going to read it again so that the public, who drafted this? And I don't blame the draftsman, because the draftsman is not the author. The draftsman is only a servant. I want to know who is the author of this. And looking at you in here, I suspect that not one of you is the author. I suspect that all of you in here are the beneficiaries of what I am disclosing. That it is eminently possible that none of you knows that this legislation is permitting a board to select a chairman or a CEO to deal with the matter of contracts. You did not know. You are not the authors.
On a point of order, Madam Chair, the honourable member is clearly misleading the House. Nothing at all in the legislation stops the requirement for any contracts to go through procurement. And for the honourable member to suggest that this is some way to circumvent procurement and the procurement legislation is clearly an attempt to mislead this honourable House. No part of this legislation suggests that.
I'm obliged to the honourable member for Christchurch West for that intervention. By way of clarification, I say not a word about procurement. The legislation speaks of the management of the resources and contracts. Contracts! Not a word about procurement. So that I'm not going to accuse the member of going ahead of me and clearing the government in terms of procurement. We're all grateful for that clarification. but I am speaking about the management of contracts. And if the member wishes to clarify, he can get up and say to the court what is his interpretation of the management of contracts. The honourable member is free to get up and say whether the management of contracts includes the award of contracts or the price of the contract. How much you're paying your family or your friend, or bringing it down to the level that it needs to be at. What is the definition of the term management of a contract? Why can't the CEO or the board deal with that? Why? So, honourable member, to you, ma'am, I am not venturing into procurement. I am asking why this legislation allows a chairman, independently of his board, to deal with the management of contracts. It is there, Section 81B. The public will now ask the question when this bill becomes the law. I want the public of Barbados to remember Section 81B of this legislation, which gives a chairman or a CEO, and I'm going to focus on the chairman, acting by himself. Who is the author, honourable member? Not you. Not one of you. Who is the author? Don't answer that. Lose your pick. I will close by saying to the people of Barbados, through you, ma'am, that when this bill becomes an act of parliament, go and ask the government to explain Section 81B of the legislation. I have dealt with the administration of things that could create confusion. But there's another C word that seems to be embraced by this legislation. And I challenge any member of this government on the other side to get up and tell the people of Barbados that there's a similar provision in any legislation which allows the chairman to act independently of the board in relation to the management of contracts. Point to it. Point to it and I will accept. I can't think of it. All of us in here have been chairmen and chairwomen of boards. And I have never encountered similar legislative permission. I've never encountered it. But the honourable member for St. James Central did say that we are talking here about trillions of dollars coming in. St. James South, I beg your pardon. South. What Norfolk? St. James South, I apologize. In fact, she is due a great apology. Greater than she may understand.
A lot of men give him an apology.
Beg your pardon, ma'am?
A lot of men have to give him an apology.
No,
If
the
you want to
apology
make
is
that
for-
apology now, sir, please.
The apology is for the honourable member for St. James South, who will sit there and say, but how could he do that to me? I apologize. Yes, ma'am. So the public will be asked again to ask this government about Section 81B of this legislation. I press on, ma'am. I press on. The author can get vexed with me and tell me all kinds of things about myself. All kinds of things. And I sat down here, ma'am.
Your back is broad.
Broad.
And you can take it.
Because I'm doing my job.
As has been
I
received.
am doing my job.
But then you, sir.
Man. Came a little rough last week. And I sat here. I hear things about myself that I did not know. I did not know these things of myself. That,
You know, sir, in politics, you get a lot of that.
Yeah, they're
But let us
preparing-
keep the focus
they're preparing
on the matter
videos
under
for
discussion, and then we could talk outside.
I should be in Queen's Park, still shedding all kinds of things. Why? All I could do is laugh, tell the truth. So, ma'am, I will not be deterred. I will press on. Now, normally when you are corporatizing a department of the public service, there will be issues related to the continuation of that service and the rights and privileges and so on. And that always will be a concern for those who continue. Now, the legislation, and this is not controversial, the legislation itself speaks as to that continuation, and it seems to be given an option to those good young men and women who work there. The legislation seems to be saying to them that they can continue on secondment, in other words, they continue as public servants, or that they can leave the public service and take full-time employment with this place called Business Barbados, which is going to bring in trillions of dollars into this country if we are to take the honourable member for St. James South at her word. We await those trillions of dollars. You see, we accuse the government of sweet talk. And it is not an accusation that is without foundation or merit. Because if you bring this legislation here today and you're saying to the people of Barbados that by this single stroke, there are trillions of dollars out there somewhere hiding behind a rock in the Middle East or Japan. And as soon as you pass this legislation, trillions coming in. And when people in Barbados say that these people talking sweet and not delivering, they get vexed. They get vexed. But I wish the honourable member had not said that this morning, that this legislation will unleash the trillions of dollars that are looking to come from under that rock and come into this country and find investment and make trillions upon trillions of dollars. Let us come back to the bread and butter of the legislation. Let us not be fanciful. Let us not tell the people of Barbados fairy tales about this legislation. We've already told the people of Barbados not the fairy tale, but the horror story that is contained possibly at 8.1b. I don't want them to forget it. And those who did not know of its existence will leave here today and ask the author, how could you put that in there and not tell us anything? They could curse me next week or today. Again. So I was saying to you, ma'am, that the legislation offers employment by way of secondment or fresh employment with this entity. I will not want to be one advising anyone there. I don't come here to give legal advice. I come here in parliamentary tradition to ensure that laws are proprietous. I am now going to bring the public to Section 16 of the Act. Which again limits the board. I spoke about the limitations on the registrars, the limitations on the CEO, the limitation on the board itself. This would not be complete. My dissertation will not be complete unless I come to Section 16 of this act, of this bill, Your Honor. Section 16 says, well, it has a rubric, it has a heading which says, limitation on powers of the board concerning staff, etc. I wonder why. I wonder why they're not giving the board its usual powers in relation to staff. You know, ma'am? Well, let me tell you what the legislation says. Notwithstanding the powers conferred on the board by Section 8, which is the one I just read. So they're telling you the legislation is now saying, and I'm going to say it in a way that we all understand it. It does not matter what Section 8 says. Listen to Section 16. The board shall not, without the prior approval of the minister, assign to a post established by Business Barbados a salary in excess of such amount per annum as the minister may determine. So that, I'm not going to read it exhaustively, Section 16 is saying to the board that in relation to certain matters concerning staff, hold your horses. Hold your horses. You may be a board. But when it comes to assigning posts, appointing persons to posts established by Business Barbados, and the other one, providing for the payment of pensions, gratuities, and similar benefits, hold your horses, board. And it says to the board, hold your horses, because this is now time for the minister. This is now time for political power. You are corporatizing a department of government. You are giving, presumably, fullest powers to a board and a CEO. And when it comes to certain matters concerning the staff, hold your horses. It is now time for ministerial power to be displayed. Hold your horses, board. It is now time for the exercise of political power. And this legislation proposed wishes to claim that it is pursuing corporatization. This is not in the nature of corporatization. Let the corporation be run by its corporate executives and its board. Butt out, minister. Butt out. If you're corporatizing the thing, you still want to choose the staff. You still want to determine who are the experts, and I use the word expert, and the act itself, the bill itself, speaks of experts. Here is where it speaks of experts. Section 18. So that Section 16 is saying to the board, I'm going to repeat it. Section 16 is saying to the board, what do they call it? Barbados what? Business Barbados. We're establishing you as a corporation. Run your business. Run your business. But some clever politician has determined that matters involving the staff are to be dealt with by the minister. And you tell me, and you tell this country that you're corporatizing. You're not corporatizing. You are colonizing. You are continuing to keep your long political tentacles deep within the organization. You're not corporatizing, you're colonizing. Decide now whether this legislation intends to corporatize or whether it intends to colonize. And if it gives power to a minister in relation to staffing matters, staffing, the engine room, the place that runs the organization, the place that gives it life, the engine room, the personnel. You got a board, you got a CEO, you got registrars who know people's expertise. And a minister is still inserting himself within the organization in relation to staffing, even on the matter of expertise. Ma'am, I use the word expertise. The act itself speaks of expertise. Section 18, turn your pages. Turn your pages. Appointment of experts. Come, children, turn the pages. The heading of this bill reads appointment of experts. You were a teacher for many, many years, and I'm only quoting you. Turn your pages, children. Section 18. They cursed me here last week. They called me all kinds of names. All kinds of names. And I can exchange a term of endearment. Somebody now going for the standing orders. He can call us, he can say that. I apologize. I apologize. You used to say in Holy Innocents, it was, turn your page, children.
Sharon Primary.
Sharon, an even better school. Beg your pardon?
Holy Innocents.
Oh, the alma
My
mater.
education. Sharon Primary.
Yes.
And all of them are excellent.
Yes. You've made a wonderful contribution to the development of this country. No, I'm way behind you. I defer. I defer. Section 18 deals with the appointment of experts. Business Barbados may appoint on such terms and conditions as the minister approves, such experts as it considers necessary to assist it in such manner as it determines. I made this reference earlier, ma'am, and I'm going to make it again. This legislation at Section 18 is given to the government, whether it is a 27-person government or a one-person government. It is given to the government the right to decide who are the experts on this globe. And when I say echoes of BTMI and QEH and HOPE, and there are a few others, but I'm not ready to talk about them yet because they think that the people in Barbados don't know. They think I don't know. I would say it so that my colleagues in here, my parliamentary colleagues would know, but I don't want them to know yet. There are people working for this government, and my colleagues, whom I love so much, don't know who is working for the government. They have consultants in this government, and my colleagues don't know. So I don't abuse them. I don't abuse them. But here is Section 18. I will read it again. Business Barbados may appoint on such terms and conditions as the minister approves, such experts as it considers necessary to assist it in such manner as it determines. They're determining the manner, or they're determining who are the experts? Echoes of BTMI. We heard about the hate hunting. We heard of a hate hunting. They went in the Far East. They went to the Far East. And they brought the best brain. I heard that during the estimates. They brought the best brain to this country. Not a fella in Barbados can remember his name. Not a man can remember his name. They remember the slogan that we paid $500,000 for, though. This country spent, was it 500,000 US or Barbados? Whatever it is, it's a lot of money. Experts in legislation, that a minister determines who is an expert, and that a minister determines which expert is to be hired, whether from Japan or Australia. As I said, echoes of BTMI. And this country This country spent hundreds of thousands of dollars pursuing experts. And now this legislation is encouraging the same mistake. This legislation is encouraging the same mistake. $500,000 for a slogan. Lots of money to recolonize Barbados Tourism Marketing, Inc. and calling it expertise. And now this legislation is pursuing the same path of expertise. Mona closed down. St. Augustine closed down. I know Cave is open. And I know that it is time that this government gives some respect to the bright young people in Barbados who are capable of running our public entities, whether they're corporatized or whether they are part of the established public service. Come here telling me foolishness about I should be in Queen's Park and all that. I'm insincere. The people in Barbados are insincere for their protests against injustice, against murdered ambitions, while our young people are forming a long queue to the Toronto airport. We are bringing experts into this country and telling our young people that these are the best minds. And we don't have good minds in this country. We didn't have good minds when they populated this place with 30 of us. That is the only time this government pauses for expertise, to ask people to make them a government. We are here at the will of the people, and we must serve the interests of the people, and we do disservice to the interests of the people of this country when we can't take up the 25-year-old or 35-year-old or 45-year-old children and give them opportunities to do these jobs. I beg your pardon, Your Honor. I beg your pardon for this emotional exhalation. And I'm not acting. I feel strongly about these things. You know how much this country did for me, man? You know that if I were born in Missouri or New York, the son of working class people, I couldn't be in a legislative body. My parents would have had to have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in an American system. America the Great and the Beautiful has not been so great and beautiful for a lot of poor people's children. And the greatness and the beauty of this country, ma'am, is that the poorest, the most humble, those out of Nazareth have occupied the highest offices in this country, whether it is a government or a corporation. And I defy this government to any time in the future deny our young people the chance to head our corporations. Don't tell me about any Queen's Park. Every one of you in here feels strongly about this. Every one of you. With a few exceptions, apparently. With a few exceptions, and I'm not going to still my voice on it. KFO closed down. This is a region that produced 2 Nobel Prize winners. And not a region, a small rock called St. Lucia. And we have a gentleman living in this country who showed the world that what he was good at, he was best at it. And he was better at that than anybody had done anything else. Bayland, he rambled Bayland barefooted. And that is why I rejoice with every day of his life. Every day that I hear that he still has breath in his body, a living example of the emancipation of those who came out of Nazareth. We have to remind this government, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And the scripture says, come and see. Come and see. I beg your pardon? Much longer? If you get me more vexed, I can give you another hour of this. I'm wrapping up now. Wrapping up now. You hungry?
Honourable member, please.
No, he's
Please.
talking to me.
Please, honourable member. Do not mind the aside, sir. Please continue your
Thank you,
discussion.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And I was talking about BTMI. And I want the people of Barbados to remember that this government betrayed the educated young people in Barbados when they found, in the words of this legislation, an expert. Don't tell me I acting. A real vex. And the people of Barbados vex. And if I acting, them acting too, but y'all gonna find out that they're not acting. The time is coming, you know. The time is coming. And if you thought that BTMI was an accident, recently corrected, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I don't attack people personally, but I have not heard anything that I did not hear before. I thought we were going to discover, Ma'am, I thought we were going to discover some large nugget of gold in Martindale's Road. I thought so. Well, with hope, that's a different matter. That's a different matter. And I disclosed earlier this year that this government is so steeped in its betrayal of people that they were taking up foreign dollars and paying to these experts. Before a man got into this country, before he had a work permit, this government was taking up pounds sterling and paying him into a bank account in England. While little children were walking up to Cape Hill with only lunch money and a piece of bus fare.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I raise on a point of order.
There's a point of order, sir.
To correct a statement made in respect of the appointment of the BDMA. The Honourable Member for Christchurch South is waxing warm and wide, but I just want to correct the record. I'm not sure in respect of the statement made, if it's made in its current relevancy or it relates to prior actions, but I just wanted the country to be aware that the CEO of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. is indeed a Barbadian. I presume the Honourable Member is speaking about the past. So I just wanted to, on the floor of Parliament, just make it known that the current holder of the office of Chief Executive Officer is indeed a young Barbadian female. And I just thought I would enter that into the record just in case it ought to be corrected so the impression does not go that is not the case. I hate to interrupt the Honourable Member, but I just wanted to make that point for the record. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member St. Michael Lessage.
I respect the intervention, and the Honourable Member, in spite of this microphone, he probably sits too far from me, because he would have heard me say that a headhunt was done, and it was an appointment which was not a good appointment, and an appointment only recently corrected. Correct, yes, and I credit you, because I know you have respect for merit. Yes, I know that. And it will not stop me from saying that the appointment before your time, Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central doesn't have to worry. He has respect for merit. And I said, the record answered will reflect that I said, it was an appointment only recently corrected. And when I say that, I meant that they reached into this Caribbean community, and more particularly this Barbadian community, and found someone of Barbadian merit. Honourable Member, I'm grateful. And I spoke of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I've never met the party. I don't even know the party's name. I am not discussing personality, I'm discussing a principle. A principle in which this government continues to question the national self-worth. And that is why I asked the question, this government closed down Kayville, this government closed down Mona, this government closed down St. Augustine. A little poor fellow or poor girl can't get a job. As an expert, honorable member of Christchurch West can leave here today and do the best and most successful dental practice. But he chose to do this. Whatever he is good at, he chooses to do. And there are thousands of young people out there who would like to make that choice. Again, I am warning this government that when it is choosing the CEO for Business Barbados, and when it is choosing the experts for Business Barbados, look inside this Caribbean first. And I don't want to do a head count and breach the standing orders, but I know that every member in this house presently agrees with me. But I also know your circumstances. I know both. And I'm going to tell the people of Barbados through you, ma'am, what are those circumstances? And I accuse them of talking a lot in here. But on Thursdays, not a word. Well, I want them to start talking on Thursdays. I want them to introduce this government, of which they are a collective part, to justice. And you don't arrive at the destination of justice unless you travel the rocky road of truth. Truth is a very rocky road. In speaking the truth, you have to sacrifice a lot. I heard last week that I am grateful. I heard that in here last week. I'm ungrateful. I'm going to use the old people's language now. Because I get a little tralia, means that I must stop telling the truth in my Barbados. I heard that last week, ma'am, in your absence, from that place where you are, that I am grateful. So I am to get a little tralia and become complicit in mendacity. I'm going to use words deliberately, because I was also told last week that I use a lot of big words, but I can use them. I will not, for a little tralia, become complicit in mendacity at the expense of the rights, interests of the people of this country. I'm not going to do it. And I don't belong in those circumstances anymore. And I have no regrets. Not one. Not one, and this is not to make a judgment of anyone in those circumstances. Every man got a right to determine his own destiny. They like Bob Marley? I commend that line of Bob Marley's. Every man got a right to determine his own destiny. I'm wrapping up. I'm wrapping up. I will alleviate the discomfort. I will alleviate it. Those who are hungry shall be fed very shortly. But I wanted to nourish your spirit with the truth. As to this legislation, and as to the possible sinister aspects of this legislation, don't accuse any of you of being the author. Who the cap fit, let them wear it. They like Bob Marley. Man to man. You want the whole thing, Your Honor? It's so unjust. You don't know who to trust. Let us come back to the legislation more particularly, ma'am. And let me say that I would ask this government to revisit Section 16 of this legislation, which is allowing the minister on behalf of the government to encroach, to trespass on a corporation in terms of the quality of persons who classify as experts. The persons best qualified to know expertise and to appreciate the expertise that is needed for the corporation are the persons who work there, whether as chief executive officer, as registrar, or as chairman and board. What minister what? What minister what? I'm going to go back to it in closing. I've heard your appeals of hunger. I've heard them.
Honourable member, please. Please.
Echoes of the man that was recruited from the Far East. Well, not Far East, it's the East, because I don't know what the Far East is far from. Echoes of QEH, still echoing. Echoes of hope, which is more despair than anything else. I'm very serious, not acting. This is genuine anger. But I'm not supposed to come here and be angry. But what I will say to this government is that the people out there are angry. The people out there are angry. And I want my colleagues to know it. And they're not angry because they hate any of them. They're angry at the indifference that this government is showing to the rights of people. And this legislation today, one would not think that corporate legislation would expose or reveal government's indifference, but it does. In that section where it says that a minister has the right now in this country to determine who is the expert that is to go and work at Business Barbados. Leave, if you're corporatizing, corporatize. If you want to colonize, do that. But don't try to do both. And the legislation is not doing both. The legislation is purporting to corporatize. But the effect of the legislation is for governmental colonization of this entity that is supposed to be called Business Barbados. The business of the government in this regard is wrong. It is immoral. It is wrong and it is immoral. Give to the young people of Barbados their due. Render to the young people of Barbados their due. Give them respect. Stop them from forming the queues into Toronto. This government doesn't understand that that is the effect of the denial of young people in this country. This government does not understand that. And I want this government to understand that they should take this legislation back and redraft it in a manner that reflects the interests and the entitlements of the young people of this country. Experts what? We have seen the examples. I'm going to repeat it. We've seen the examples of distorted concepts of expertise and who is suffering, who is paying a high price. And I will say this in closing, that it is clear that this so-called Bureau Barbados will constitute a greater expense to the government than is presently constituted by the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office. The cost to run Barbados business, or Business Barbados, whatever they call it, will be far higher. But of course, the people are going to be told, oh man, this is a new bright and shining object. So accept the higher costs. But unless they do what they must do and do it properly, the efficiencies or the inefficiencies to which the member for St. James South referred will continue, if there are such inefficiencies. But what this government will do, this government will create another expensive organization on pretty talk. Pretty talk. That is Barbados's biggest industry now, pretty talk. And the industrialist is the government. Everything is pretty talk and no results. Not a result. And this corporation is threatening to become another expensive undertaking of the government. If there are problems in there, fix the problems. No corporatization headed by whom they probably intend to head it will solve the problems. It threatens to be another massive expense. And I don't say that without the evidence. Because, ma'am, it is worth repeating that this country paid $500,000 for a few words. For a few words, a slogan. You got poor people running about this country can't buy a chicken. And this government took up the taxpayers' money in the tune of $500,000 and pay some people in New York to string together less than 10 words. Less than 10 words, a slogan. And that is why I say that this government is Barbados's sole industrialist in the manufacturing of pretty talk. And I don't say that because I can, the evidence is there. $500,000, $500,000. How many people that could have employed? But we employed the best minds up in New York. According to them, the best minds. Some genius mind came up with less than 10 words. And they expect people in Barbados not to be angry at them. $500,000. I don't even remember the nonsense that was written. They're not using it anymore. And the people of Barbados will remember that in its aftermath, this government set up a committee of 18 persons, having wasted the taxpayers' money. Like how they intend to waste it on this corporation. Came up with some council or commission to come up with a slogan. Ma'am, have you heard the likes of that? You were a teacher, ma'am. And you had young minds in your charge, teaching them to think creatively. And a government can justify its action when it gives $500,000 to somebody to come up with a slogan. And in the aftermath of dismal failure, the government sets up a commission. You drag up 18 people, put them around the table to come up with a slogan. Where's the slogan, Minister? It happened before your time, Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central. You have so much of a burden. And in having a burden, you have to unburden yourself of the nonsense that occurred in this country prior to your ascent to the Ministry of Tourism. A lot of nonsense they walk about this country doing, spinning left, right, and center. And then come and telling people, oh, we have a commission now. And they will come up with a slogan and tell me don't come in here and talk. Tell me don't come in here and talk, and if I talk, I am grateful. Why you give me? What is a God? Well, whatever I got, whatever it is I got, perhaps a little Australia, but I will continue to speak the truth. And I will continue to remind the people of this country that this is a government of squandermania. Whether 1 or 27, there's squandermania. Man, abort last week. Abort last week. Not a word. Because this parliament must continue to be a place of dignity. And these personal attacks are not in keeping with the best of traditions. They're not. It is within the finest tradition of this parliament that this government must give account to the people of Barbados. And that everything that it does, it must consider that my responsibility is to scrutinize, analyze, criticize, and if necessary, chastise, and I will not resile from that public responsibility that I have under the Constitution of this country. You can heckle me about George Street till you can't heckle no more. It matters not to me. You can tell me all kinds of things about myself. Does not hurt me. You can try to silence me with insult. Does not stop me. Because unless I am visited with some grave misfortune, look for me next Tuesday. And look for me every Tuesday after that. Because somebody in this country has a responsibility to tell the truth about the nonsense that this government is doing. And there are hidden aspects within this legislation that reflect the nonsense, the injustice that is visited on the lives of the people of this country every day by a silent government. A silent government, but deadly. But deadly. Let us all go and eat. I'm obliged to you, ma'am.
Honourable Member for Christchurch. Yes?
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that this honourable chamber be now suspended until 3:30 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be now suspended until 3:30 p.m. All other honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honourable chamber is now suspended until 3:30 p.m. today.